And I'm going to start the bidding here at £5 million. £5 million, £5,500,000, £6 million now, £6 million, £6,500,000, £7 million now, £7 million.
In the art world, we're down and out, we're down and out, we're down and out. In the art world, we're down and out, we're down and out, we're down and out. In the art world.
Hey, hi, welcome to another edition of Down and Out in the Art World. I'm here with my co-host, painter Bobby Dowler, and we're going to talk today about getting your cash, your money in the art world. So basically, we are going to be speaking every month or so on issues relevant to people working in the art world, particularly people from a poorer background, perhaps working class people and other marginalized people. And we're basing this on our own experience and also on kind of topical news stories at points. I'm an artist. Well, no, I'm not an artist. Why did I say that? I wish I was an artist. I'm a writer and critic and sometimes curator. And I have several years experience working in the art world. Bobby is an artist who also has several years. We both have probably around the 10-year mark. I've written for Freeze Art Review and Art Forum, as well as having curated at the Venice Biennale and Manifesta. Bobby can talk later about his experience. He's represented by the Hannah Barry Gallery in London, and he lives in Paris. And firstly, we have to acknowledge that we are kind of privileged whilst also hosting a program about being underprivileged. That's because I guess it's possible to be both privileged and not privileged. So I think it's important to point that out and for people to check their privilege and to kind of like be aware of the possibility of somebody perhaps being from a working class background, but also being a white male, for example, as we are both white males from England. We don't claim to have the worst situation, but we have experienced being poor, being from a lower class background, being marginalized in the realm of the arts. So we're talking about getting paid, how to land paid gigs, how to hang gallerists upside down so that money falls out of their pockets when they won't pay you, and not just gallerists, but magazines. Yes, hello, you know who you are, and museums and other people in the art world who might not pay you on time or might not pay you at all when they've agreed to pay you. So we're talking about a number of things: how to get that first paid gig and how to get the money that you're supposed to get paid due to your contract or your spoken agreement or whatever that might be. So the first thing we're going to talk about is getting that first gig. How long should one pass before getting paid for their artworks, for their writing in magazines, etc.? So I'm going to talk about my experience first, then pass to Bobby. So I've spent years in London as a wannabe writer. So I'm mostly a writer, although I do many other things. I really wanted to be a writer for a long time, since I did my art degree in the late 90s. And I went on to do a master's in art theory with the intention of becoming an art theorist and critic. So I did a lot of work for galleries, for shows with friends where they'd say, could you like provide a little text? Could you write a text about my work? So this was fairly okay, to be honest. I was often on unemployment benefit. Sometimes I was working freelance and getting enough money to support myself, but not really very much money. And I used to hang out in the East London art scene, where you would, often go out to private views, as part of your social life. You couldn't afford to go to the pub. And I would often be there as a kind of, as part of a show, because I'd written something about an artist or something. But this wasn't critical work. It was more like art writing for art shows, almost artistic pieces that were writing that would go along with the show. They'd all be free pretty much. My kind of foot into writing was more in paid work for websites, not art websites, but trade websites. People who wanted something writing on just whatever. So you in the early 2000s, early 2000s to 2006, 7, there was just an explosion of online content. People paying you to write articles to order. So they might say, today I want 5 articles on on wine, or on dog grooming, or on cleaning your car, or any nonsense, you would just go and research it and write something, and you got paid okay. And then that kind of bubble burst with the economic crisis, and then that work dried up for everyone. But I wasn't getting artwork. I was getting quite embarrassing, not particularly well paid, but okay paid work, doing what you call copywriting. The artwork wasn't paid until I got to Italy. And then I basically started writing for Art Monthly first, which is a small magazine with quite a wide distribution. But I mean, I say small because I think it mostly goes to libraries. But you also used to get it in kind of magazine stores in England, sort of magazine bookstores. But basically, I was in Italy. I moved there, and I couldn't find any kind of work. Again, in the art world, I couldn't even get these unpaid gigs for artists because I didn't know anyone. And I thought, how am I going to get into the art world? Because I can't write reviews and anything, because I didn't really consider there to be an art scene in Rome, which I apologize for to now to anyone who was running a gallery at that time. This is around 2008-9. But then, I guess it was 2010, Mark McGowan, the performance artist, did a performance mostly on Facebook, which was basically called Vote Tory, or I think I called it that, when he told people to vote Conservative. And it's something that obviously artists often don't do, but it seemed to be he was saying vote Tory out of shock value, and people were telling him, no, don't vote Tory. Dave Beach, the theorist, who's now written a number of kind of Marxist-leaning works, or works around Marx, and left-leaning criticism, he got very upset, and he had a go at Mark McGowan, and McGowan carried on and did videos of him praying to a picture of David Cameron, and it was all kind of tongue-in-cheek, but people said he still shouldn't be doing it. It offended people, and I wrote an article about that because it was online. So I thought, being online, I can write about it even though I'm in Rome, even though I feel really outside what's happening. And having done that, I then wrote to other magazines and said, like, hey, I've written for Art Monthly. So this is how one can become a critic, I guess. You somehow get your foot in the door with something that maybe you would only you would think of writing about, or only you could write about. And I felt only I could write about it because I was forced to by being away from the art scene. So I wrote about something happening entirely online, which was kind of didn't happen then. And so having done that, I wrote to other magazines saying, no, look what I've done here. Why don't I write for you? And I actually think nothing happened that fast. Then I was at an art fair in Rome, the Rome Road to Contemporary Art Fair, which is now defunct. And I bumped into somebody from Art Review. Actually, it was Martin Herbert, who I spoke to. I got an introduction by Catherine Drake, who's a critic. And he basically said, look, send me something. And we kept in contact, and I sent him a review idea, and I got some reviews with Art Review. From then I went on to Freeze. So these are my first paid gigs: Art Monthly, Art Review, and Freeze. And I'm going to stop there. And Bobby, what's your first paid gig? But just go like that far into how it came about, and then we'll get into what we got paid for those first gigs.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And I think there's an interesting link as well between Mark McGowan, because actually, yeah, his name was coming up in the area which I lived in at the time. And yeah, I mean, how long did it take to get paid? I mean, I didn't have any ambitions particularly. I was kind of maybe a bit presumptuous. I wanted to kind of make a dent in, I don't know, like art somehow. And yeah, I was at art school at Camberwell College, and I think maybe McGowan had been there too, and he was doing some of his performances around that area. There was a place called Area 10 where I believe that he left a car. I mean, I don't know if he actually did it or not, but I think like he drove a car in there and he just left like the car running for the entire time. Not sure if he would have got paid for that one, but yeah, the first time I actually got paid was when I sold something, and I just sold a drawing, and I wasn't trying to do that. I just I've been co-organising exhibitions a lot of exhibitions, quite ambitious shows in the squat that I lived in at the time with artist friends, and we more or less funded that from spare cash that we had. I mean, quite a few people were on the dole, so yeah, we got drink sponsorship, and just invited our friends to exhibit. and then yeah, invited neighbours and press, just like local press. And yeah, one of the neighbours came in and offered me like 150 quid cash for a drawing, which I duly accepted. And then off of the back of that, I did a show which opened Hannah Barry Gallery in 2008, and I sold a couple of £1,000 worth of drawings and a sculpture, including like some drawings directly to Hannah, which I think she gave to people as gifts. And then anyway, that allowed me to become like legitimate self-employed. So I went from job seekers allowance to legitimate self-employment.
Okay, yes, thank you, Bobby. Okay, so I basically didn't go into to money, but when you write a review for an art publication, you don't get paid by the gallery, rightfully. You get paid by the publication. Sometimes galleries might offer you money, but you shouldn't take it. I never actually did. I can swear by that. There's actually a gallerist who once asked me if I would like some extra money, more than one, and I've always said no. And I think there's gallerists that can back that up. There may even be email exchanges. But the idea is that one stays impartial writing reviews and articles about artists by not taking money from the artist or the gallery or the museum, etc. But what basically happens is that the magazine will give you around £150 or euros, 100 to 150, 60, I think is what's the going rate. It's been the same as long as I've been doing it. I still occasionally do it. It basically, yeah, if you were to go and see the show and write it up the same day, it's an okay rate of money. If you're going to see the show, write it up, have to do edits. If you're also traveling to the show in a different city, you're basically not getting a good rate. You're probably going to get quite a poor hourly rate. So yeah, I mean, it kind of runs, it keeps running because often the gallery will say, okay, I was living in Rome for years, so they would say, okay, we're in Milan. Do you want to come up to Milan? We'll pay your train, we'll pay your hotel. You often end up with 4-star hotels, quite expensive train travel and a meal. And you might get invited to the special opening, like the collector's opening or whatever. And so you get all these kind of perks, but the pay isn't that good. But the perks do kind of act like a kind of bribery, so you don't tend to think you can really say something bad about an exhibition when you've been wined and dined and put in a 4 or even 5-star hotel. So, I mean, people often say if the perks are very good, it's often to hide poor pay. So it's always in a way like the magazines and the institutional gallery kind of work in cahoots. That it's possible that the reviewer doesn't get paid very well, because there's a certain amount of hospitality going in to cover the fact that the pay is quite low, or at least the pay can be fairly low because there are these other perks. So this is kind of a gripe I have, but this is well known, and some magazines kind of tend to say now they'd rather you wrote about stuff in your city or don't take hospitality. That's something I've heard increasingly, because they are aware it's kind of a bribery. It might put them in a difficult position because there can be like people saying to them, your reviewer gave a shitty review of me, or they might not say to them, but they might get upset with the magazine and be less inclined to buy advertising, for example, if they gave hospitality to a reviewer and then the review isn't good. So the practice sometimes is frowned upon, but I don't know. I think when this gets frowned upon, it's probably likely that this is because the magazine has decided this isn't anymore in their interest. But anyhow, I mean, and talking about getting paid, advice on getting that first gig. Well, I mean, some of these magazines pay, so getting the first gig just means getting the first review. When I first did it, I thought this was great. You could get 100 and something quid, pounds or euros, for a review. And I suppose if you're starting out, then this is good. I think this is also a reason why reviewers tend to do a lot less the older they get, because it's not such a good rate if you've been going for a while, and you do get tired of trying to support yourself on reviews alone, if that's what you're doing, after a while. So people, a life of a reviewer isn't very long. Often the life of a reviewer who has to support themselves from reviews alone is not very long, and they end up going into curating and things. But anyway, getting that first gig, I mean, I had to write to these magazines for years. I was writing to them in London for years. Back in the day when people used to reply to emails, even when they didn't probably want you to work for them. So they'd say, sorry, keep at it, but not for us. I got from, I think Dan Fox, who was with Art Forum or Freeze or someone in New York. And I got maybe similar replies from other people. These days, you'd be hard pressed to get a reply if they weren't, really thinking you were right for them at that time. But I would say anyway, keep going, because once you are right for them, they're going to snap you up, because the life of a critic is often fairly short. I mean, their working life, not their actual life. So they need critics, basically. So, one thing I would do, though, if you want to become a critic, is make damn sure you can actually write, because nobody wants to just basically be completely reworking. Some magazines do give massive overhauls of your writing to fit their house style, but they're not going to do that for somebody who can't even write in the first place. That's not to be snidey, because most people can't write very well. But just if you can write and you have a passion for it and you want to be a critic, you can probably become a critic. Just keep submitting the pieces. When you're getting perpetual refusals, you're probably doing one of two things. You're not writing about things they want to hear about, so you're pitching the wrong kind of text for them, or you're not writing very well. So I would really kind of read what people are accepting before pitching, and just maybe get a friend to double check if you've got any friends who have that kind of time, and if you can then obviously help them in return. Probably that's, I don't know, whatever your system of exchange is between your friends, but I mean, you don't want to be exploiting people, but get someone trusted to help you just look over your text and maybe try and work out why you're getting rejections initially, but just keep trying. And then my first paid things I said were for friends in galleries, doing the gallery text or writing an extra text for an artist who wanted a little text by their work. I mean, by all means do that. I'll get onto later why you might work for free. I don't think your friends are particularly exploiting you, in that situation. Maybe you might have reasons to do it when you're starting out. If they start to see money coming in, you might want to say to them, hey, could you send a bit of that my way, which I think friends are very happy to do once they're getting work. So that's just some advice on getting started there. Bobby, any ideas yourself on how you might get that first gig or sell that first painting? But you kind of already said, but go on.
Yeah, I mean, apart from being relentless, and knowing exactly what you want to do, there's not, I mean, you might do an unpaid internship for a few days and realize that you don't want to be in that industry. So that would be a good reason to leave. I mean, I did a lot of unpaid work experience stints at magazines when I left school at 16, and I learned that I didn't want to go into the publishing industry or the film industry, and I realized that I couldn't really write well enough. So there are some benefits, I mean, from doing that. I mean, as I said, I was 16, lucky enough to still be living at home, even though I think my dad probably wanted me out of the house at that point even, but I was able to do that. At the same time, I mean, I took a year out to do stuff like that, and in between that I was for the whole duration I was working part-time as a waiter in Pizza Express restaurants, and doing as much hours as I could. And if I wasn't doing work experience, I was working on building sites, and it was pretty hardcore. But you learn just as much from doing paid work as you do from doing unpaid work. But you're going to be mixing with a different don't know how to put this. I mean, you're going to be working in magazines. The people that work in magazines are very different from the people working at building sites. But also, I mean, I would say that you've got to be generous and collaborative with other artists and not too competitive. Breaking into and squatting empty residential buildings in order to kickstart your art career is not legal or safe, and can be very time consuming and stressful. I mean, I've seen a lot of friends, and I've done this myself, just renting a room with other artists, and basically I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but just putting all of your stuff in a spare room somewhere, or maybe all into one room or the bathroom, and then just doing a little DIY group show, putting your friends' works on the wall in empty rooms, inviting the neighbors, inviting local press, and any art world network that you may have. probably best not to invite your landlord, because they might want to put a stop to stuff like that. But making sacrifices and thinking creatively is obviously a must. And when those people visit you, offer them a cup of tea or like a glass of wine or a beer. And you never know, I mean, like that's kind of like how people might make their first sales, or certainly like all of the exhibitions that I've organized over the years, which is quite a lot. Probably like I've worked collaboratively with hundreds of artists over the years by now, and normally every group show there is like an opportunity which comes out of that, and it might not be for the main organizers of the show, but it might promote one set for one artist, or another artist might get like a residency off of one of their contacts, because the art world needs to see that you're active and you're passionate and that you're going to do things, whatever, and that you're willing to basically invent your own art world almost.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good point. So I just want to return to like, is it okay to take unpaid work? It's an interesting one, because I think in some cultures this is kind of more normal, that one would take work, let's just say out of the love of making art, but I'm kind of saying that a bit sarcastically, but there are cultures where paid work is less forthcoming, there's less paid work, and maybe they've got used to people who maybe are a little bit better off financially working in those industries. And if you can't like do the jobs, if you can't afford basically to take only 800 euros a month working full-time in a museum, for example, or 800, 1200 for a foundation gallery or museum, then your only way in might be to do some unpaid stuff, kind of like, hobby like, and that's kind of seen as okay. Or you do it for the laughs, you do it, you make some art with some mates because you want to see something done, not because you expect to make money out of it, because that doesn't really happen in that country. For example, I'm thinking of Italy. In the UK, on the other hand, it's seen as kind of really weird that people would ask you to do something for nothing, apart from if you're doing an internship because you genuinely want to do that, because maybe you're at the beginning of your career or something. So sometimes, I mean, I'm kind of in two minds here, because I lived in Italy a long time. I kind of dislike seriously the idea of doing something for nothing, and the way people expect you to often within the Italian contemporary art scene and other kind of parts of the cultural world. But sometimes, with friends, you'd be like, let's just do this thing. Let's make a party with some VJ sets, and you kind of, you do it because if you weren't going to just do it, it wouldn't get done. So, we'd have these parties called Art Class War, where I'd do some VJing with the musician and artist Simone Bocciugno, and we'd have other performers involved. And we'd be like, we've got a venue, a foundational museum. They want us to do it, but they're not going to give us any money. And we're like, well, who the hell is going to pay us to do things which are basically against the middle class establishment of the art world? And of course, we were kind of being co-opted, because museums, which are very much part of the system, were allowing us to do this stuff. But we knew we were kind of being co-opted, but at the same time, we were kind of like sticking our fingers up at the middle class system by being hosted by these museums. But the main point is, we knew we were getting no money, but we were like, something has to be said about the middle class nature of the art world, and no one's going to pay us to say it, so we'll do it for free. So then you're making a political point, and therefore, you're happy to do it for no money. So you do get these kind of situations also when you're kind of like entering industry. Will I like do something for low pay or no pay to get my foot in the door? This is a classic internship example. I mean, make sure it's a legit internship. I mean, a lot of legit internships are linked to universities, so you're getting credit for your course. I know this is the case in Italy. So, make sure, it's legit and not just like somebody's trying to get some unpaid labor. I don't know exactly how it works in England, but still, you want to get an internship with a proper training program incorporated, not just can you make the coffees for us and do this extra crappy work, menial work we don't want to do. There should be some kind of progression in the internship whereby you're learning something. There's a process you're going through, not just will you do this stuff we don't want to pay for. That situation is basically crappy. So I mean, you have to make decisions. I mean, is it going to further your career? Is it going to help you learn something? Is it maybe political? Is it something that you're never going to do it? You're never going to get paid for doing it, but you think it should be done, and it's going to raise visibility of your cause or you, etc. So this thing where some people are like, I don't do something for free ever, and they're constantly looking like to check they're not being caught out. I don't think you're always being caught out. You have to know how you're profiting from a situation. Having said that, most of the time you should be getting paid. Yeah. Only if you know you're profiting from not getting paid, there's a reason why this is working for you. There's a reason why you have to do it this way around with not getting paid. This situation is rare. Only if those conditions are the case would you do something for no money. In the vast majority of cases, you should be getting paid. This is clear. So be very careful. Make sure if you're not getting paid, you're doing that for the right reasons. Now, once you do get a paid gig, okay, and one way to do that is to say to yourself, I'm no longer doing this for free. So like we get beyond the, okay, you decided to do something for free. Say you really want to get paid now and you're fed up with doing stuff for free. Supposing that's the case, one way to do that is to just literally say, right, I'm not going to do any more unpaid work. And then you keep going until you get a paid gig. We already kind of discussed how you might get that paid gig. But once you've done that and you've fulfilled the job, how do you make sure the money arrives? Okay. So I've lived now in London, Rome, Venice, and now I live in North Finland. So I lived in some very different cultures. London was always simple. You did a job, people paid immediately, generally, because English don't like having awkward debts. I don't think they're particularly more honest than other people, but they kind of get nervous when they owe money, and they get rid of that, problem quickly. I found, although I did leave there like 12 years ago, I don't know if that's still the case. Italy was just insane. People routinely don't pay. And that's people who say, I'm going to pay you, or they put your artwork up in their gallery and they sell it, and they literally don't then give you the money, or they pay late. They will mess you around to an unbelievable degree, saying, I will pay you in a week, I'll pay you, then, okay, in another few days, and they will avoid it until they don't pay you at all. This is very dodgy, and no one should put up with this. It just happens I've always eventually been paid, but bear in mind that I was working for several of the biggest art magazines in the world at the same time. So if anybody in the art world pissed me off, they would probably feel that would put them in some kind of danger. So I mean, danger in the sense that they might look bad in, I might write bad things, or I might say bad things to my co-workers in these magazines. Now, they've got a weird vision of things, because when you write as a critic, you don't generally talk to anybody in the magazine apart from editorially when they send you back some comments. But obviously people think, I better not piss off the guy from Freeze, Art Review, etc. That didn't really make me very happy, because I knew that a lot of people, a lot of my friends who are artists, weren't getting paid, whereas I was only getting paid because I was seen to have some kind of minimal amount of power. The thing is, even I had to argue at some points to get paid. So Bobby, actually, just if you briefly tell us about, without naming names, because we'll get into a bit later, we don't name names, but what's your feeling about people paying in the different cultures you've lived in?
Yeah, I mean, again, like there are certain pockets that appear to have, or seem to have, like their own kind of like culture, whether that's formal or informal. Yeah, I mean, I remember like in the early days, some American artists, the same age as me, we were all about 25 years old, coming to London and dealing with galleries out there and speaking to them, and I was really surprised about how professional they were, and they were really shocked at like how unprofessional they considered to be, me and my other friends to be, in terms of working with galleries. But yeah, I mean, I've had a gallery not pay me, that still owes me money to this day. And so, yeah, I learned a lot from that experience, and it's one that I would say to people that to tread carefully, and obviously, like, there's limited opportunities, so you've got to go for stuff. But yeah, it's a tricky one, and like, I mean, I've got a really good relationship with the two galleries that I work with now, in London, Hannah Barry, and Gallery Alegria in Barcelona. And yeah, I mean, I don't have family money or state money to fall back on. I'm really, living, month to month. But I would say that, like, the main thing is that you've got to find good people and not bad people, because there are really good people out there and there are really bad people out there. and you've got to be careful about what you get into. I mean, first of all, I would say speaking the same language is a must, and real life meetings before you do that show with someone. I mean, it's kind of complicated if you're trying to do that internationally, and I was trying to show in other countries from which I lived in, so I took more of a risk there. Also, yeah, I mean, you will take risks, and you might get burnt, and you might learn something from that, and you might meet some other people along the way. I mean, I wouldn't say to people to be too hesitant. In some situations, a gallerist might wrongly assume that you have family money to back you up if you are wanting to be part of their art world. So just be wary of that. If you can have, if there's like a social system, if you're lucky enough to have like a good social welfare system in your country, they might support you somewhat. If you have an established kind of self-employed practice. I mean, I don't have anything like that in France, but I think in some countries in Europe they do have something like that, and that can put you in a position where maybe you can take a few more risks in that area. And about payment, I would say, yeah, I mean, be upfront and honest about what you expect, and have a copy of that information on email. But also bear in mind that long-standing art world relationships between artists and gallerists are based upon trust. And more often than not, gallerists are unable in a short to medium term to break even on that money they invest in you personally. So, you have to kind of be realistic and try and understand that like you might also be a loss maker for the gallery. So don't make crazy demands, and bear in mind that many gallerists will be put off if you're a pushy artist who they think to be too professional and with unrealistically high expectations like fast payments. So know when to keep humble, when to stand up, and how to spot an honest gallerist. I heard one story recently. It sounded crazy. It was like, an artist was at a gallery, and basically like the artist said to the gallerist, they said, they asked them for like 50,000 to like buy a house, so the artist could come work in. I mean, obviously the gallerist, was pretty insulted by that. I mean, yeah, sometimes crazy ideas can work, and sometimes, they could destroy the relationship. I think that's all for that point.
Okay, yeah, that is an interesting point, that you can just accidentally offend people with money by being too brash and forward. It's not always in your interest to be kind of very upfront. You maybe have to appreciate the dynamics of being middle class, which I don't understand at all personally. But I mean, if you're going to get into the art game, yeah, people say you might want to like try and see things from the point of view of the collectors, the gallerists, etc., who maybe don't want people coming up to them all the time and saying, "Hey, can you part with some of your money?" Because they start to feel like you only want them for their money or something. I mean, I don't know. It's not excusing the art system as a whole, but it's not the individuals we're really after. It's the system, which is part of the capitalist system. We don't want to like badmouth people for being middle class specifically, and there are obviously tricky situations which come with the territory. But that's as much as I'm going to say on that. We probably should do we can do a special edition on how to speak to middle class people, like Dr. Dolittle speaks to the animals, but not at the same time. So without getting paid, my advice anywhere is agree the price before the job, okay? With the stipulation that if the job appears to be bigger than you originally forecast, you'll need to up the price. So you say, I'm agreeing that on the basis of 3 paintings or 1,000 words, and then if it gets more, then you would put that up. You need to state that before you start. Another thing is state when you want paying. Okay, so most countries have laws that you would be paid within 30 days of completion of the job or the invoice being made. Some places it's 60 days. These are sometimes working days. So look at the law in your country. There is like a basic law on how quickly a freelancer should be paid. But that's irrelevant if you say to somebody, look, in my situation, I expect to be paid by X date. Okay, so you can stipulate that you're going to be paid within 10 days, 15 days. Of course, it probably looks better if you're not, being really super over eager on that front, because if you look like you really need the money, you look also like you don't have much work. That's a tricky one. You need to get the balance right. Okay. If you need the money, then probably you should be saying only paid by X date. If no agreement is made, it reverts to the 30 days or 60 days or whatever it is in your territory. Then if someone's not paid within that time, you can start to ask them to pay. Now, look, anyway, my feeling is that you need to state in the beginning, I want to be paid by X date, or ask, when will I be paid by? Okay. Ask that again when you invoice. So before you do the job and when you invoice, when is the money coming by? Get them to state a date. Now, this is interesting because people often will answer everything in a given email except for the precise date upon which they're paying. Now, bear in mind that they're going on the basis that they have up to 30 days to pay, for example, from invoicing. So they don't need to answer you yet if you haven't already kind of made an agreement. However, it would be polite for them to answer you. Now, I've got a feeling that people who work in payroll, that's the admin officers who work on actually making payments in museums, companies, they all basically work to a specific formula, which is that they are there to protect the employer. Okay. If you're there to protect your employer and someone's asking you for money off them, you will try not to state the date upon which the payment will be made, as long as you can get away without stating the date. Because once you state the date, the payment will be made. If for some unforeseen reason you can't make that payment, then you're going to put your boss in trouble. So the payroll officer is thinking about not putting their boss in trouble. So there's reasons why these people are super awkward. They're trained to not give too much information to you. So, bear this in mind. But, I think sometimes you need to speak to these people and say, I kind of understand your position, but I really need to know when I'm getting paid. So without begging, just be very clear, get that agreed date. And when they go beyond that date, remind them, you said you were going to pay by this date. The money hasn't come. Now use neutral language, because you're not going to get very far by getting really dramatic by saying, I need the money for my rent. I've done all this stuff. I guess it depends what you have to lose. It never really got me in that much trouble. In hindsight, I wonder whether it was looking unprofessional. So I'm giving you my kind of advice based on hindsight. All this stuff about you need the money for rent, you need to eat, there's nothing in the fridge. That is not really as important as we had an agreement, you were paid by X date. That agreement was made on the 1st of March. It's now 10 days after when you said you were paid by, etc. Fact, dates, etc. This is what's important. Okay. So once they've gone beyond the date they've stated, you send them an email, you were paid late, you stated on the 1st of March, you paid by the 18th, it's now the 20th. If they don't reply to that email, you write another one. I wrote to you 2 days ago stating that you hadn't paid by the 18th as you had agreed on the 1st. I'm asking you again, when will that payment be made? You've got every right to make that demand, to ask that question every day until they pay. That's where I'd start to get annoying on purpose. Okay. I once wrote emails every day for 10 days to a magazine. Literally, I wrote to you yesterday asking, you still haven't answered. Next day, I wrote to you yesterday, and really to the point of appearing like dry sarcasm, but it was just stating a legal point every single day, and eventually they paid. So, I can kind of do that and get away with it. Some of you probably can't. I mostly get away with it because I don't really care. But a lot of you can't possibly also, because I think with artists, it can be quite damaging. But, if you have to lean on them, lean on them. If it's become clear they're really messing you around, then lean on them heavily. Point out, that they have basically broken an agreement, and that's how you eventually get paid. Okay. And in the rare cases where you don't get paid, then you have to seek legal advice. Bobby, anything to add?
Yeah, I haven't done this before, but I'm sure that someone said it to me quite recently. But they said, there is also, and maybe that's a bit radical, and I wouldn't do that to any of the galleries that I worked with. I really don't have that kind of a relationship with them. But for other freelance work, I work for artists sometimes, and I do tech work, and yeah, they've all been pretty good at paying me, to be honest. But yeah, I have had some other occasions, almost slightly on the cusp of the art world, doing installation where people were refusing to pay how much was originally agreed, and months late. And I think someone did say to me that or maybe I read online, but there is something you can do on your original email to them, or just to say something like, if you don't pay within 1 month, then there's going to be like a fee added to that. So each month, it adds up, and I know that's like, it's a bit like debt collecting, but I mean, essentially that's what you're doing. And all of these emails, all these extra emails, I mean, and you have to factor that in. So any bad clients, late payers, make it more expensive for them. And if they're going to go elsewhere, then yeah, it's not going to be any great loss, because you really need to find good people, even if that's going to drive you into more poverty in the short term.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole point of capitalism is to make profit and therefore spend as little as possible on the resources necessary to producing objects for sale. So this means paying the artists as little as possible, paying art workers, critics, etc., as little as possible. So costs will always be driven down. On that note, Artists Union England is worth looking into. They'll give you 30 minutes free legal advice if you join as a member, and tax guidance. They also give rates of pay as an art professional, and I think they start at over £20 an hour, so well over €20 an hour. Yeah, I mean, think about that. Think about what you're worth. What you're worth. I think basically, yeah, less than 20 an hour these days is maybe unrealistic in terms of sustaining yourself, given that not many freelancers are working 40 hours a week. So you've also got to be getting paid for the time you're doing, improving your skills and sourcing work, etc. Other than that, basically, I'm going along with what Bobby says. I mean, the legal route is obviously the one that comes at the end if you don't get paid by anybody, just going on from that. And I think that starts with a warning letter. I mean, that's something a union like the Artists Union in England could help with. But these things are quite simple. If you know the law, you just state what the person has done, the fact they haven't paid within a given time, the fact that that is illegal. That's often enough to frighten somebody, unless they're a complete shyster. And me and Bobby do know some complete shysters, but we have a policy of not calling out those people. We'll only name, people who do good things, in that sense, or kind of name people neutrally. But we're not going to literally say this gallerist didn't pay Bobby when we were working together or whatever. It may at some points be very clear who we're talking about, but then that's the worry of the person we're talking about. If you can identify yourself in anything we say, if you think they're talking about me not paying, then that's frankly your problem. You need to kind of look into yourself and why you're doing things like not paying people. For now, so we've been talking about basically how does one make money in the art world, or how does one get paid? We're not talking about big money, just how do you get paid the money you deserve. Try and come up with a price that you're happy with and don't go below it. I think this is a situation. I mean, obviously, if you're just out of uni, you're probably going to be feeling differently about money in comparison to somebody who's maybe in their 40s. I mean, if you've got your rate, you won't go below. So I think, you can say to people, this is my rate. And then, they have to accept that or not. If they can't accept it, then they have to go elsewhere, or maybe they're giving you a month's work. So then you could drop that. You'd often drop your rate if you're getting a large quantity of work. That can make sense because you're guaranteeing a steady income. But Bobby, what's your kind of thinking on how you price your work?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, and I think what is problematic is that it's problematic, but we also have to kind of admit it if we're participating right now. If we're not going to do anything ultra radical, which maybe some of that kind of Bitcoin stuff could it is a bit radical and new. But what I mean is there is a system. So okay, first of all, you have to ask yourself, do you want to participate in that kind of art sales system? I mean, obviously there's other things that an artist can do, like work with institutions, get fees, apply for funding, teaching. All of those things are they're all different parts of the art world, and more that I haven't mentioned, such as criticism, curating, biennales, etc. But if you're working with galleries like how I am, for example, say if you're starting off and let's say you're a sculptor and your sculptures quite big and they cost £2,000 to make them. Now you might be thinking to yourself okay, I need if I sell these from a gallery, then the gallery takes their 50%. I mean, bear in mind as well that you know, I'm not sure if everyone really thinks about this, but if a collector buys something from a gallery, then they're going to pay VAT, and then after that VAT is taken away, then, you know, you're getting your 50% of what's left, you know, before the VAT is going to the artist and 50 to the gallerist. I know that's not always the case, but, you know, great if you can negotiate more for yourself. But, you know, I don't know how many gallerists would be willing to kind of to entertain like those ideas if you're not like high in demand. But anyway, what I'm saying is that just because your work has a high production cost doesn't mean that like the gallerist is going to take it on and try and sell it, you know, just because that's the money which, you know, seems to be fair. It's not actually about fairness. You know, this is capitalism. This is like about the market, and it's about what people are willing to pay, and it's about, you know, obviously reputation. So yeah, I mean, you basically, if you want to participate, then you've got to be like willing to basically probably take a loss for a long time, and, you know, play long game. I mean, there are other things you could do. I mean, you could change your work and make it more commercial. I don't think that's a good idea, but that's what some artists do. But, you know, when you hear about these artists' work, young artists' work, that their prices are going up, and, you know, they're in the press and everyone's talking about them, and the big collectors are even like, talking about them for a while, and it's a kind of hype.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I haven't been entirely clear before today in this session, because yeah, I was trying to kind of like not give people bad advice, because I was assuming people listening might want to make money out of art, etc. I mean, I actually don't really make much money in the art world now because it is just so awful. And I get much more out of what I'm doing because I'm just doing what I want. I'm writing what I want. I'm writing more about media theory now, which I still think is art. I mean, about media, new media, memes and stuff. But I'm not like working on the terms of the art world. I mean, realistically, I think that you're much better off not being too reliant on the art world itself. Most of my advice is for people who want to be in the art world. I mean, and then when I say that, you know, when you're writing your emails to get payment, don't be too aggressive. Don't reveal that you don't have much money. Well, I mean, that's my advice if you want to like not rock the boat. Personally, I think that when you're making a plea to somebody for money who owes you, who's paying you late, then you should point out how difficult it is for somebody from your background to be in the art world in the first place. You should point out that this is a struggle of many people, you know, that it's not just you. I mean, you might not want to get that polemic, because people might think you're they're going to think you're crazy, because they're used to people who just, their parents have got their back, they've got they've got a home from the family, or whatever, they're not struggling. So when you go in like, I need the money now, they're like, how the hell would someone need money right now? Why would somebody like not be able to eat? Why have they not got money in the fridge? Why haven't they got money in their bank? They start to think that you're like some destitute wild man or woman, you know. And I think that, you know, the only way to correct that is to be very frank with them, and it's kind of their problem for being so naive as to think that there's something wrong with you for being in that position. So I have always just been very upfront, and then sometimes now I wouldn't, just because you've got to pick your fights well. So I don't think you need to go around like advertising that you don't have much money, especially if it's going to get, you know, that's going to get misunderstood by people. But I wouldn't be against at points pointing out, you know, realities to people and how their situation, how their behavior in paying people late or not paying them enough or not paying them is basically keeping a whole class of people out of the art world, of the, you know, different forms of marginalized people and working class people. So I'm not saying don't be militant. I'm aware not everyone's going to be, you know, like me. Also, I would add that my overheads are not that high, as I'm mostly a writer. But it's not that, I'm just more honest. But you know, please go stating the obvious. Tell people that they're being, you know, basically supporting the status quo, excluding people from by their behavior, that your situation isn't unique, that when they say they're going to pay by X date and they don't, that means you're not paying your rent, that means you get in trouble, that means you can't eat, that means you can't go to the next opening, etc., etc. You know, if you feel you can make those statements, then by all means make them, but you've got to make your call on that. If you want to be kind of fitting in and you see the path to being a genuine creator who's doing something they believe in. If to do that, you're going to have to be in the art world for some period of time, and you think that you're better off not rocking the boat. If you paint water lilies, you know, you don't want to maybe be throttling a gallerist saying, "Pay me, you're a class enemy." You know, if that's the case, maybe you're going to have to be a little careful on how you phrase things, and bear in mind that people, you know, might employ you less if you're more honest. So, you know, that's your call, because I'm not telling you who to be. We'd rather equip you to get where you want. So that said, let's wrap up soon. So we don't shout people out for not paying on time. Okay, we're going to now shout out some people who do pay on time. So, you know, we want to we want to give people strategies to survive the art world. We want to make the art world a better place. We don't want to call people out, because capitalism and class inequality is a major culprit, not a specific individual. However, those individuals who don't pay on time are really shitty. And if we're not mentioning your name ever, probably it's because you don't pay on time, or you've done something else which is bad. We don't name and shame, but I'm just going to give some instances of people who do pay on time. So big up to the people who do pay on time. Art Forum magazine pays on time, and they don't even ask you for an invoice. They generate the invoice, and then they email you a few days after, and they ask you if you received the money in a polite email, which is personally written. And this is even when the quantity is like 40 for, like, if you do a tiny text, critics pick online text, it's like, I don't know how many words, 250. Even that they will chase up to make sure you've been paid without you having to lift a finger. Freeze, as much as it pains me to say, because they are at the capitalist end of the art world, always paid on time. And actually you can say to them, look, hey, I need the money soon. And they would like push it through, which is rare. So well done, despite being capitalist. In terms of museums, the Centre d'Art Contemporain, the Centre of Contemporary Art in Geneva in Switzerland, pays on time and pay well, and are always very respectful in their contact. So well done to them. And then I'd like to name just loads of institutions that pay on time, but I can't. They're not coming to my mind. Because also I'm not going to name anybody who paid me on time but didn't pay artists I know. This is a problem. So I'm naming people who I only know I have instances of them paying on time. I can think of some other people who paid me on time, but you didn't pay all your artists on time or quickly or enough. So unfortunately, they're the three that come to mind immediately as paying honestly and on time. Hyperallergic as well, incidentally, also pay in reasonable time, or at least when they say they're going to pay. And if I've forgotten you and you pay on time, then sorry. But anyway, thanks to those people. Bobby, any people who paid you on time or enough?
Yeah, I mean, I actively work with Gallery Alegria, and they always pay me super quickly whenever they sell work, and Hannah Barry as well. You know, in my experience, like she's always paid me everything that she's owed me, and yeah, I mean, I've been working with her for a very long time, and I can say that, like, certainly in like the last 5 years, it's always been really quick. And both of those gallerists as well, you know, like they will, you know, they've often like taken me out for dinner and, you know, helped me out and, like, you know, given me advice and time. I am fortunate, and, you know, there are definitely other people that are not doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah, so good for those people. So some last points. Don't sell yourself short. So think of the price you want to get. Make it clear what you're getting paid at the beginning. Make it clear when you're getting paid before you even start. Try and get that in an email. So just ask them politely, when am I getting paid? They reply, then you've got a date that they said that on, and you've got a date when they're going to pay. And then after you've done the job, chase that up as soon as they're beyond the payment date. So yeah, don't sell yourself short. At the same time, there's a global pandemic. No one really owes you anything. That is to say, if they said they're going to pay you, then they owe you. Obviously, if they have something of your property, they owe you. But you know, from the offset, people don't owe you something in life, unfortunately. That's not to say there shouldn't be great state provisions and welfare systems and whatnot for all of us, but that's a different issue. People, when they want something from you, then they owe you something. So then when they want something from you, you're giving something to them, they have to give something back. Yeah. And just remember that when people are giving you something, it's because they need you. So then, you know, they might need you enough to pay you more. Who knows? It's worth thinking about that before you agree a price. You know, to get yourself in that position in the first place, go and make yourself wanted by people. Yeah. Make yourself wanted by them, do something good, then make sure they pay you. Okay. So we've been Mike Watson, that's me, and Bobby Dowler. And this is Down and Out in the Art World. We'll be back soon with another edition. Until then, stay safe and make sure you get paid.